I cut everything flat because I don't want to manipulate what I'm hearing with EQ during the recording. I'd rather go out in the room and add a little more top to that guitar or take some of the boominess out of the bass. I fix it out there in the studio rather than trying to fix it with EQ immediately. Those are problems that are hard to fix in post. So I try to get it as close as I can.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Today's episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is sponsored by Roswell Pro Audio, maker of handcrafted microphones in California. Inspired design and impeccable attention to detail will help you capture a gorgeous vintage sound without the vintage price tag. Check out their beautiful line of microphones at roswellproaudio.com. You may already know that using true analog gear is one of the best ways to create a great record. Yet increasingly, we live in a digital world, recording and mixing inside the computer. So what if you could have the best of both worlds? Tigler Audio Manufaktur is bridging the analog-digital divide by creating high-end analog gear like the Schwerkraftmaschine compressor and the Raumzeitmaschine reverb, whose knobs you can control remotely using a plugin in your DAW. Or their many analog units like the Cream bus compressor with mastering EQ, or the Veritube recording channel that let you save your settings using a custom recall sheet plugin, offering a complete line of pro audio gear from compressors to EQs to reverbs and beyond. Now you can get a pro analog sound while benefiting from the power of digital. Let your DAW help you move your knobs so that your music can move you. Click the link in the show notes to learn more about Tigler Audio Manufaktur. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is John Cuniberti, a 70s rock drummer playing in Eddie Money's first rock band, the Rockets. When the group disbanded in 1973, John turned his attention to live sound engineering. And in 1975, John joined a touring sound reinforcement company and in a few short years found himself mixing on-stage monitors for Stevie Wonder. In the early 80s, John became chief engineer at Hyde Street Studios in San Francisco, where he recorded 3 Dead Kennedys albums and dozens of other punk, metal, and alternative bands like Flipper, Forbidden, Xentrix, and Crome. And by the early 1990s, John received both platinum and gold records for co-producing and engineering 6 Joe Satriani records, including Satriani's groundbreaking 1988 record, Surfing with the Alien. In 1994, John designed, manufactured, and sold the first commercially available reamping device called the Reamp, which I actually have here in the studio. Thank you for that, John. And in 2000, John opened a CD mastering suite at the world-famous Plant Recording Studios in Sausalito. For the next 8 years, John crafted his skills in the art of mastering. During his time there, John mastered over 1,000 CDs for both major and independent record labels, including Tracy Chapman, Sound Tribe, Sector 9, Tea Leaf Green, Rogue Wave, Thomas Dolby, Aaron Neville, Jesse Colin Young, Fela Kuti, and the Grateful Dead, all great artists. And in 2008, John won a Grammy for his mastering work on Global Drum Project by Mickey Hart and Zakir Hussain. After leaving the plant in 2008, John built a mixing and mastering studio in his home in Oakland, California. In this studio, he continues to work on projects for Joe Satriani, Sammy Hagar, Kevin Gilbert, PJ Harvey, Chickenfoot, and the Neville brothers, many others. And in 2016, John began work on his YouTube channel, One Mic, the Minimalist recording series. In this series of over 20 videos, John demonstrates how you can record an entire band around one stereo microphone with really amazing results. His latest series, titled The South, features 5 acts performing in 2 historic studios, Muscle Shoals Sound Studio in Sheffield, Alabama, and Sun Studio in Memphis, Tennessee. So please welcome John Cuniberti to Recording Studio Rockstars. John, it's an honor to have you here. Are you ready to rock, man?
I am ready to rock unless it includes hanging sheetrock.
Nice, man. Well, I kind of feel like you're responsible for a lot of what we might even call rock. You've done so many rock records.
Yeah, many. Yes.
I appreciate that you have such a wonderful bio, and I know that was a long one for me to read, but you've just done so many cool things. There's really no other way to tell it than to just kind of tell it, you know?
Yeah, it's been a pretty long career, actually. And when you were reading that, I was thinking, man, this guy's old. But, I'm still learning. I mean, a day doesn't go by where I don't go, wow, why didn't I know that? Or I should have thought of that, So, yeah, it's an ongoing thing for sure.
There's so many names on your credit list that just kind of perk my ears up. I mean, first of all, I love the fact that you were recording in San Francisco all these punk rock albums. And to go back and listen to that stuff, the Dead Kennedys, Xentrix was a really cool one that I actually included in our YouTube playlist that I put together for this. I didn't know anything about them, but they sound like, if Minor Threat and Metallica formed a band, it was somewhere in there, it's just this like super powerhouse metal punk rock.
Yeah, I think it was called thrash metal.
Thrash metal, there you go, yeah.
Thrash metal, yeah. There was a lot of that coming out of the Bay Area at the time. And Xentrix is actually a British band.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So they were coming over because that was the sound. That was a place to go for the sound, I guess.
Well, they had adopted the sound in England themselves. And I think had put out one record prior to the records I did with them. And then they contacted me, and I went there, actually, and recorded in Birmingham, a little underground studio I think it was called Sine Wave. And
Birmingham, Alabama?
No, in Birmingham, England.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking of you going down to Alabama now, and I was
right, exactly.
There's a connection there.
Yeah. So, they were a great band, and I did 2 albums with them.
And I don't have to go on a tangent, but it just reminds me of how it seems like punk rock sort of came over to the U.S. from England, and then you guys are doing a punk rock over here that England wants to come over and get a sound for, and we've just always been passing music back and forth, it seems.
Oh, absolutely. The influences, they just continue. I mean, everyone's listening to everybody, and, we don't, at least I have never tried to make a record sound like somebody else's, I guess inherently because I know I can't.
Right.
But certainly when you start looking back over one's discography, you can start to see, the influences that other artists and for engineers, maybe what other producers and engineers have done. I don't deliberately try to do it, but you really can't help but, let it organically influence what you do.
Yeah, sure. And big time as far as, doing this retrospective study of a discography, for me to go back and listen to a series of punk bands from San Francisco in the early 80s, and then, listen to Joe Satriani and be reminded of the metal sound and everything. Not that things are, not in any kind of negative way, but I mean, it identifies a style and a sound, and it's just so cool, to go listen to that stuff.
Yeah, it becomes very stylistic, particularly in retrospect. And, when you mention the Dead Kennedys and Joe Satriani, the first thing that pops into my mind is just how incredibly different they are.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I adapted well to the DKs because my background was in live sound. And, their sound really comes from playing live. They weren't, when I found them, a studio band, so to speak, and had done very little recording. They had done some, but for them, recording was not unlike bands from the 50s and 60s, where they just basically took their stage act and brought it into a studio and set up, and somebody recorded it.
Yeah.
And so that's why those records have all that kind of angst and energy to them, because they were essentially live acts. And I could think on my feet, and I was very fast, and I didn't get caught up in minutia. and technique. Although by the third album, we certainly did. And they started adapting more and more studio technology and started having more fun in the studio. It was partly my urging. I would turn them on to stuff and they would go, "Oh, well, that's really great. Turn it up to 10."
Right.
And they did want to go out of their way a bit to try to make sure that their records didn't sound like anybody else's.
And stuff that makes me think of elements of them sounding different. I don't know all the band members' names, but the singer's voice just has this wonderful, like, intense vibrato, going on the top. And I noticed that you really mixed, the vocals were really prominent in such a way that you could really know what they were saying. And I wonder if that was a big change for them compared to being on a stage where, a lot of punk rock, the vocals might just be kind of buried in all this guitar and drums and stuff.
Yes. And the singer, Jello Biafra.
Of course, I apologize. I should have totally known that.
It's okay. It's been a while. Lyrics were extremely important for the band and the band's success ultimately.
Yeah.
The way, the records were being mixed was the band was at the console with me and everybody had their own fader. And that was really to try to get through an entire song without getting all the moves done correctly. It often required editing. I would have to maybe just get through the first verse and chorus and then make an edit on the half-inch tape as we went through the song. But everybody was in control of their fader. So Ray, the guitar player, would be pushing up and down his fader for certain sections, and Jello had his own fader for his voices, oftentimes a couple of tracks, because he always liked to double track.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of the mode of operation for, non-automated mixing.
I love that stuff. I mean, we were doing that, even in the 90s, mixing on Mackie consoles or whatever analog console before the switch to Pro Tools. And it was so much fun to it felt like you're performing all the way till the mix was done.
Yeah, they truly were performances. Cutting half-inch tape as you work your way through the song, because a lot of times someone would blow a move, and rather than going back to the beginning, we would just stop the tape and then roll back a little bit, and then I'd make the edit. And oftentimes, those edits were a little janky.
Right.
Funny things would happen. Somebody wouldn't reset a fader or an echo or a reverb or something would land funny. And you would end up with these quirky little nuances that, of course, would be literally impossible to do now with digital editing.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that in a lot of classic records too, where I can't remember which ones. I don't know if it was Hotel California is coming to mind for some reason, but I feel like sometimes when you pay close attention as an engineer, you begin to notice that there's a change in the song where the reverb just gets cut out and everything, and it's clearly like a tape edit later.
Speaking of Joe Satriani, he brought up about a year ago, I think it was the 30th anniversary of Surfing with the Alien, and he said, maybe we ought to do a remix of the album. And I started thinking about it. I brought up a couple of songs, and I started to do some remixes just to see if it was even a practical thing. Mm-hmm. And we both soon realized that a lot of the funny little quirky things that were going on in those mixes on the original album, I couldn't do because of the editing. Because it just, the half-inch editing would just make the guitar suddenly drop out or pop up, or a funny delay. And we both agreed that if we eliminated that from the remixes, that people would probably notice it and probably not dig it. So we just decided to not do it.
What a trip. Yeah, I guess remastering is kind of a different story. Sometimes that can be pretty effective because you're just trying to bring out things that were in there already. But even remastering can kind of really change the experience for some people's listen.
Yeah, you have to be careful. When Joe and I went back and revisited his entire catalog for a box set, I ended up doing all the mastering to all the records. And I think there was close to 15 of them by then.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite it was an opportunity to kind of create consistency among all the albums that date back as far as 86, I think. And there were probably 5 or 6 different mastering engineers employed over the 30 years.
Right. How many, did you ever figure out what the decibel gain was over 30 years of mastered records?
It was quite a bit. And I took, by the time I got to the box set, the loudness wars were over, and I was able to bring back some dynamics and I think improve on the mastering
Nice.
for some of the later albums that did get caught up in that loudness war.
Yeah, really. Well, maybe you want to share a story about meeting Joe and getting started on, pretty much a lifetime career of working together?
Well, Joe was in a band called The Squares, which were a 3-piece power trio. I think that's what we used to call it. And they were performing their first gig at a local nightclub, and I was mixing front of house for a band called Greg Kinn. And I think the manager came up to me and said, "Hey, we're a band from Berkeley. We don't have anybody to mix their sound. Will you do it?" And I said, "Sure." And they came out and they started playing. And the first thing I noticed was just how incredible the band was, but mostly just how incredible Joe was. And I was quite impressed with them. So I went backstage after their set and I said, "Hey, man, you guys are amazing. Do you want to do some recording?"
And how old were you?
How old was I?
Yeah, at that point.
I was 30, I think.
Oh, okay, all right. So you had some confidence at this point.
Well, yeah, a little bit. I had been doing live sound for quite a few years, and a friend of mine and I had built a 16-track studio out of a lot of broken recording equipment that we'd gotten in from studios that were going out of business and whatnot.
Did you guys consider calling yourselves Broken Studios?
No, because
probably not the best name choice. Right?
Well, it's funny. Then there was no real such thing as vintage recording equipment. It was either it worked or it didn't work.
Right, totally.
So we wanted it to work, so we'd never say anything like that. So I went backstage and I said to Joe, "I want to record you and I want to record your band." So they, of course, agreed. We got together and I ended up recording almost 30 pieces of music with that band before they broke up after they just could not land a record deal.
Wow.
And they should have, but they didn't. Then about a year went by and Joe came to me and says, "Hey, man, I want to do a solo record." And I said, "What do you mean a solo? You going to start singing now?" Because he wasn't the singer necessarily in the band. He goes, "No, it's going to be an all-instrumental record, and I want you to do it, and we're going to do one track at a time, and I've got it all figured out." And I thought, wow, this is like the craziest thing ever. Because there was no genre for that. I mean, at all. But I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to really get a great sounding recording, because prior to that, I was working with punk and metal bands, and it was really flying by the seat of our pants, low budget, get them set up, get those mics up, and get that thing recorded and get it out the door in 10 days, that kind of thing. And Joe said, "No, I want to be really meticulous. We're going to do one track at a time. And that way I could really spend time choosing microphones and fooling around with different types of effects and equipment and things." It really become quite self-indulgent, actually, with it.
Do you feel like you instinctively gave an equal amount of attention to all instruments when you started recording that way? Or do you feel like drums and bass are good and I really want to focus on the guitar? I mean, the guitar is obviously the thing that really stands out and seems to make a whole new statement, musically and in recording in that era and that genre. And I wanted to ask you that question too. It's like that style of Joe's playing guitar was like a whole new expression of guitar. Just listening to it again, thinking about other bands like Eddie Van Halen, even thinking about the Dixie Dregs and Steve Morse, just the way it expressed itself through the amps. I wondered if you felt like the way to record that, which I think is what you're telling us, also evolved with the guitar playing itself.
Yes, because it was an instrumental record, the melody that he played was treated like a human voice. The recording technique was often treated that way, and where it sat in the mix was treated that way. There would always, of course, be a guitar solo, and then we would always want to treat it differently, like you would normally with any kind of pop production. And yes, I paid equal attention to everything because we knew that the foundation of what Joe was about to play was dependent on the groove and the sound of the drums and the bass. And we used various types of drum machines, or we created a hybrid mix where we would have a machine just play the kick and the snare, and then we would have a drummer come in and play like the hi-hat and the cymbals, because back in those days, those were 8-bit samplers and stuff.
Right.
And the high end was pretty nasty sounding. So trying to deliver a hi-fi record required really miking up nice pair of cymbals and hi-hats and trying to create a hybrid drum sound out of that.
That's interesting. There was one of the videos you shared with me was an interview, I think from a ways back, where you were in the studio with Joe talking about doing some recording, and you were talking about the gear you were going to use, and you had a stereo mic pre in your hand that had these great DI inputs, and when asked what you were going to use them for, you said, they're going to be on the hi-hats today.
Yeah, I don't really anymore, but I had for a long time quite a collection of microphone preamps that I would carry around with me. When we first started making records, in fact, that the record Surfing with the Alien in '88, there were no real external or what we would call outboard microphone preamps available. I think GML just started building one, but people really weren't cutting up consoles and putting them in boxes yet.
Yeah, that wasn't until the mid-'90s, right?
Exactly, because the consoles were still in use. That only came much later. But fortunately, a good friend of mine, Dan Alexander, was an audio dealer at the time. And he would go to England and he would find consoles typically out of radio station or even bigger studios that were just going out of business or were getting rid of their equipment. And he would find consoles and microphones and such and buy them and bring them back. And he was really one of the first people to actually start taking mic pre-EQs out of Neves and putting them in boxes. So I had a pair of 1066s, a pair of 1084s.
Nice. What was his name again?
Dan Alexander. He still has a business called Dan Alexander Audio.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and he was actually a vintage guitar dealer, and just switched his attention to audio equipment, and built a bunch of studios here in the Bay Area that was based around his ability to buy this equipment dirt cheap and then have it refurbished. And
well, very cool. Well, so let's keep talking for just a moment about guitar recording methods.
Sure.
You talked about searching for reverbs and stuff, and I wonder if that for you felt like more of the mix decision, or would you look for a reverb to go with a guitar line? And also, I'm going to just conjecture that the reason reverb was a whole new discovery was because the guitar was the lead voice, and so there was room for a big reverb around a guitar. Was that something that you would look for in the tracking process and try and print that a lot, or was it something that you would look for in the mix? And then as far as the recording goes, were you discovering kind of multi-miking of cabinets and stuff like that at that point, or was this something that had been around for a while for you?
Well, regarding a reverb, Joe and I both recognized that our favorite records had a lot of depth to them, and that when you're recording one track at a time, you have this almost obligation to think about where that's going to sit in the three-dimensional depth, depth of field, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. It's like if the analogy is building a house one brick at a time, every brick you put in isn't the front wall of the house. Some of them are the back wall of the house.
Exactly. And so as Joe would add more and more guitars to the production, we had to think about where are these guitars going to be. We used delays a lot because they helped a lot of times with the groove and the timing. Yeah. And then the reverbs were mostly used to push stuff back in the room a little bit. Yeah. I would have to experiment as we built the track on whether or not it would the guitar would receive a delay or would receive a reverb. And then, of course, all the settings that one would have for reverbs, you have taken into consideration. So that was a big part of it. Just kind of getting back to the Dead Kennedys, those punk records of that era were very, very dry.
Yeah, really.
In fact, the less stuff, the better, I think was the name of the game. However, when I started adding reverbs and delays to the records I was making with the Dead Kennedys, rather than them, getting angry with me and telling me to turn them off, they actually embraced it. In fact, it got kind of out of hand by the second album, Frankenchrist. I went back and listened to that about 6 months ago, and I was thinking, man, that's a lot of reverb. What the hell were we thinking, I
thought you'd go back and say, man, that's a lot of name. That's a lot of title for that album.
Well, it was a very controversial record in general.
Yeah, I remember them as being a controversial punk band, and hence the lyrics being important and making sure you can hear what they're saying too. They had a message all the time.
Yes, but I think it was the H.G. Geiger a centerfold painting that he did called Cox or something like that.
Okay.
That I think that really took it to a whole nother level. But anyhow,
I'll have to go look at the cover on that one again.
I didn't mind using reverbs and delays, and I didn't mind putting it on those punk records because I thought, why did we don't want to sound like the Sex Pistols, we don't want to sound like X. We want to sound like the Dead Kennedys from San Francisco. San Francisco has always been, a bit edgy.
Oh yeah, totally, and experimental too.
Yeah. I've been a bit, contraire when it comes to record production, so I didn't mind it, and I didn't care what people thought.
Can you share a story about working with Thomas Dolby?
Well, I had been a huge fan of his work in the 80s, and he called one day when I was at the plant, and I couldn't even believe it was him because I hadn't really heard about him for years and years and years. And I thought, maybe is this guy for real?
Wow.
But he had collected a whole lot of live recordings, and he wanted someone to sit down with him and to produce an album of all live works of his.
Very cool.
Which was fantastic for me because it really meant I got to sit and work on, this incredible catalog of music of his. And he was very, very, very interesting guy.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I've heard actually that he's teaching in Baltimore now or something like that. And I want to try and get him on the show at some point. But I'm sure that probably getting to know his tracks for you at that point must have been very eye-opening to discover all these different sounds and the way he put all this music together as well.
Well, I think that the technology got to a point where he could actually go out and put on a one-man show, with his and play it. I mean, it wasn't just he wasn't just playing back recordings, not unlike a lot of DJs are doing now in the EDM world, But he just came out, but he had such a great sense of melody. And he was really a pioneer.
Oh, absolutely. Did you ever get, I might be asking an unfair question here, but did you ever get a sense from him what his process was, his writing or initial creation process was? Because when I think of the productions he's done, they're just so massive, they seem like they could only exist as a finished product or something.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that, but you only spent a couple of days with him, and there was so much work on the table. There were certainly times where I just wanted to stop and just talk about. I had so many questions for him, like I would with any of my, heroes or mentors. Paul McCartney came in, I would want to talk. I wouldn't want to do any work for him. So I would just want him to answer the 340 questions I have for him.
That's great. Well, that's kind of the way it is on this interview right now, except I get to ask you all the questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to I want to spend some focus time talking about the One Mic series, but I've got a few more questions I want to ask you because you've just done, like I say, so many fascinating things. I feel like I cut you short before you could talk about the concept of multi-micing to record guitars when you were doing Joe's records and others like that. Is that a worthy question, a worthwhile question to ask you about?
I don't think I'm going to be able to bring anything to the party with that. Okay. Other than maybe more of a philosophical point of view about it.
Sure.
Joe and I, because we grew up literally in the analog world and were restricted to 16 in the beginning and eventually 24 tracks, we made decisions as we went. As we built the songs up, we had to be sure about what we were getting. So the idea of recording 5 or 6 tracks of guitar so we could make a decision later which microphone we were going to use, that wasn't even on the table.
Right. Well, I guess what I was getting at was a little more of, discovering that a 57 and a FET 47 blended together gets a great sound, for example. Maybe that's something that I felt I learned by making rock records and by trying to mic up a Marshall cabinet at some point that I had known nothing about before.
Well, in the beginning, I don't think we did that very much. I think that I had a handful of microphones I'd go put out on his cabinet or cabinets, and we would push up the faders, and Joe would pick one.
Nice.
And I wouldn't necessarily blend them together unless he asked me to. Now that, he and I are making records digitally, I oftentimes will mix, the ribbon with the SM57. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a common thing. It's funny when I do that, he often doesn't like it.
Do you think that might have something to do with sometimes our brain registers that a single mic is just completely phase accurate, and as soon as we start mixing things, we sense that that's happening? Or I could be reaching here too.
Well, I think that I'm going to speak for myself here,
sure.
And of course, I'll be the first to say that there's no rules in recording. I think that the final outcome will justify any method you choose to get there. But Joe is really sensitive to performance and how his guitar feels in his hands versus what he's hearing. Mm-hmm. If I put a mic up that we think sounds good, but if it doesn't feel good to him and he's not getting an emotional response from it, he'll just say, move the mic or change the mic. And then I will, I might ask him a few questions about, what are you looking for? And then we'll just keep trying some different things. We don't usually try to mix ideas together to come up with something. We're more direct than that. If he goes, well, this thing is too edgy, it's too bright. When I get up here on the neck, I don't like what's going on there. I'm hearing too many harmonics or whatever. I'll go, oh, okay. And then I'll go grab some other microphone. I'll put it somewhere else. And he'll go, wow, that took care of that problem. But the low end's getting a little out of hand. So then, right. I'll just go back out and pull the mic back a little bit. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think it's, a nice reminder if, rock stars, if you're ever recording and you're playing guitar yourself, there really is a thing. Same with the voice. If you're the instrument and you hear the result come back through the speakers, it gives you a perspective on mic placement and compression and everything else that you just can't get because you need to be the one playing the instrument to know how that instrument sounds to you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, so I wanted to ask you one other question about Joe. As far as this sort of invention of all these new kind of guitar sounds too, did you guys begin to come up with a vocabulary for how to describe all these different guitar elements? I mean, there's that time also introduced the kind of chung 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 sound, you know, in a guitar. I don't even know what that is. Is that even a note? But it's so critical for rock and roll like that.
Yeah, the chunk. Yeah, I'd call it a chunk. He would probably know what I meant if I said that chunking part.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. It's palming, you know, it's some sort of muting of the string. But his technique is just so damn advanced that I don't even know if there's words been invented for a lot of what he does.
Well, I guess that leaves it to us rock stars. We'll just invent them as we listen.
Well, yeah, listen, I mean, his sound really is coming from a choice of notes, you know, his technique. I think it really comes down to that. If you take his guitar off and hand it to another guy to play guitar, even though he might be a good guitar player, he's not going to sound like Joe.
Yeah.
And I tell this to people all the time because people ask me, how do you get Joe's sound? And I go, I have Joe. That's how I get his sound.
Right.
Yeah, simple as that.
I've heard stories like that before, and it's always great to hear them again.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've probably experienced somebody else picking up his guitar and trying it for a second, and it doesn't sound anything like it.
Of course. Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Wait, you're letting other people play Joe's guitar all the time?
No, he might, though.
Just let me know when you're going to do that. I'll come try it. So another artist that's on your list here that I listened to, I didn't know anything about, but I thought maybe you could tell us more, is Kevin Gilbert, because he seemed to be doing some really cool stuff.
Wow, yeah, Kevin. Unfortunately, passed away in, I think, 96 at a very young age.
Wow.
You know, it was accidental, but he is probably what one would consider a prodigy, one of those very rare individuals who could do everything. And, you know, he could pick up an instrument and learn how to play it, you know, very early age and master it. And I could go on for an hour about him. I'll just try to make it short.
Yeah. So I think you sent a video that was a record you did where he was maybe live at the Troubadour or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, he was like one of the first guys to actually do what we now consider as progressive music or prog music and stuff like that, because he could have done pop and did a lot of pop for other people as a writer. But he was a little bit more experimental and edgy. He was one of the members of the Tuesday Night Music Club.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We're talking about Bill Bottrell and that thing, or a different Tuesday Night Music Club?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So he was part of that, and later a band called Toy Matinee. And they'd done some very progressive and really quite elaborate pieces of work that have stood the test of time. He had also was working on a rock opera called The Shaming of the True.
Right.
And this was all out of his own imagination. And he had his own studio in LA, and he recorded practically everything himself. He'd bring in a drummer, and he'd get help from other people. But he created this masterpiece, literally a rock opera. It's, you know, a Star is Born type of story where a kid shows up in LA and he becomes a star, and he gets caught up in the star-making machinery and ends up getting destroyed by it. And there's an end to the story, which I won't tell. And this record has gone on to become really touted in the progressive music world as one of the best records ever made. And fortunately for me, when he passed away, his manager came to me and wanted to know if I would mix the record. And I spent probably, 3 months mixing it. And it's quite possibly one of the best things I've ever done. I'm really proud of it. I had known Kevin prior to his death because I was brought in to do some live recording for him, which is what that Troubadour show is. And that's why I sent it to you, because his stage presence is just so awesome in that video.
Yeah, it was really cool. And it was interesting the way he went from the verse where he's just kind of being a little bit playful to all of a sudden this super powerful chorus with just like, shredding rock vocals. And it was a cool combination. What's the name of the album that you were working on that we should be listening to?
The Shaming of the True.
Okay, great. The Shaming of the True. All right, we'll see.
The Shaming of the True, yes.
Well, very cool. I look forward to listening to more of that. I want to ask you also about moving on to creating the Reamp. Why don't you tell us about that? What's the story behind that? And what do people need a Reamp for? And what are they not realizing that they could be doing right now?
Well, it came out of a necessity, actually. Right. And, necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's what I was looking for. Yep. Joe and I were doing a live record, and we got it back. We started mixing it, and I pushed up the fader for the amp, a bass amp, and it was horrible. It had buzz and distortion on it, and something had gone wrong, and it got by me because I was probably listening to mostly the DI in the truck when it was being recorded. So I thought, well, we got to take this DI, we got to put it through an amp because, you got to have some bass distortion. And remember, this is analog. We don't have a decapitator to plug in here. We have to figure out some way of getting this direct bass to sound like it's on a stage. So, the old standby was to take a direct track out of the multi-track tape recorder and plug it into a passive direct box in reverse, which would essentially just drop the signal down enough where if you could get it plugged into an amplifier, guitar amplifier, it wouldn't blow the thing up because you can't take a +4 line level signal out of a multi-track tape recorder and plug it right into a guitar amplifier that wants to see like a -50 signal out of a passive guitar pickup.
Right.
So that kind of worked, but it wasn't very convincing. It didn't particularly sound good. And this was a critical mission we were on. So I went to the tech that was working at the studio at the time. This was back in the days when we actually had techs full time in recording studios. What do you think about that?
I think I loved it. I was at Sunset Sound, and it was the most incredibly impressive tech shop I've ever seen. Those guys were geniuses.
Yes, bench techs, and they're far and few between now. It's a whole nother generation, really. People that could pull something out of a rack and set it down and open it up and fix it, fix it.
It's hard now to find.
Now you just pull the card out and send it back. Have somebody else do it. But anyway, his name was James Gangware. And I said, James, what's the deal? Why can't I have something that will take the signal and get it down and match the impedance and so I can do this? So we looked around, found some off-the-shelf transformers, and he put a potentiometer on it, and we created a little pad in there to buffer the signal. And so he put together this box for me, and I took it back downstairs a couple hours later, and we plugged it in. And it was like, oh my God, it's like Stu, Joe's bass player, standing here playing through his bass amp. I said,
so cool.
It's just like he's here playing. And now he doesn't have to redo anything. He doesn't have to come back and replay his part or anything. We can now just crank this SVT up to 10, stick a couple of mics on this thing and get out of here, So that's pretty exciting. So I want to thank you publicly on the podcast for sending me the Reamp box. It's gorgeous. Oh, you're welcome. And I have a record that I'm working on that I'm pretty sure we'll be doing some reamping on. However, it sounds like now I need to go buy an Ampeg SVT 810 at the same time. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, I think there's a plug-in for that. Oh, yeah, right. No, but it's such a cool thing, and it's really a great looking unit too. Yeah, that's the V2 was the last generation of reamps that I had built. I built them for 17 years and sold thousands of them myself. And they went through a number of modifications over the years. As once we left a multi-track tape recording, we went to digital. The output levels out of those converters were a lot hotter. So I had to make some adjustments internally.
Yeah, and it has a level knob on it, so you can essentially, Rockstars, you can plug a XLR in or a TRS or just a unbalanced input, I guess, and then you have a high Z output, and on the other side I have a trim knob and a ground lift. So basically the high Z output is the guitar level that just goes straight into any amp I want. But you can also use it to knock your level down and go through some guitar pedals, which is a great way to basically really treat your sound in a way that plugins aren't going to do very easily.
Yeah, it's essentially an interface box, and it allows you to interface +4 line level equipment, professional recording equipment, into, guitar equipment, like you say, amplifiers and stomp boxes and such. And I'm amazed at what people do with the thing. My original intention was to just have something to take bass DI tracks and get them back out into guitar amplifiers and such.
So let me ask some dumb questions that people might be thinking when they go to do this too. So you knock the level down. If you go to an amp, I guess to get it back into the computer these days, you of course would just mic up the amp like any normal amp miking. But if you wanted to come back from guitar pedals, I guess you could come out of a guitar pedal and then would you just go back into a regular DI and then just go in through a mic pre to come back in?
Yeah, you could do that, or you could put it back out into an amplifier.
There you go. Yeah. All right, dig it.
If you're going to put it like on a voice or something like that and use a foot pedal as an effects, then yeah, sure, you just go back into a DI. But a lot of the mic pre's that people have now have
quarter-inch input,
direct,
right?
quarter-inch direct input. So it'd be a no-brainer. I'd just go back into that. Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. All right, well, so we've been talking for a minute. Well, let's take a break, and then we'll come in for the second half. And I want to really dig into the One Mic series with you and learn all about that. Rockstars, if you want to learn more about John and what we're talking about, just check out the show notes at rsrockstars.com. Search for John Cuniberti, and you'll go right to the blog post. And also, if you're interested in learning more about mixing yourself, check out my free mix tutorial called mixmasterbundle.com. And that is where you can go. I'll show you how to mix in any DAW with the stock plugins, and you can download my multi-tracks and get started. So we'll see you in just a minute for the jam session. Roswell Pro Audio brings you microphone design that is out of this world. Endorsed by a growing list of artists and producers like Phil Collen of Def Leppard, Ross Hogarth, who's recorded Van Halen, Ziggy Marley, and the Doobie Brothers, and Supa Dupes, working with Drake, Mary J. Blige, and Eminem. These are all rock stars that have discovered just how great Roswell microphones sound. Check out the Mini K47, which uses a capsule modeled on the one in the vintage U47 at a street price of only $299. Or the beautiful Delphos condenser microphone with a capsule tuned like the vintage U67 with great clarity and far lower noise at a street price of only $899. In fact, you are hearing my voice right now on the beautiful Delphos microphone. These mics are carefully crafted by hand and immediately feel good even before you plug them in and hear how great they sound. These are well-built microphones that will last you and your studio a lifetime of great recording. Check out more audio examples of these awesome mics at roswellproaudio.com. Hey Rockstars, we're back for the jam session. My guest today is John Cuniberti, and we were going to talk about this amazing new project that he has called the One Mic series. Am I calling it that right? One Mic. It is the One Mic series, right? Is that the official name for it, John?
The official title would be One Mic, the Minimalist recording series.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so are you ready? Are you ready to jam?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool, man. I forgot to ask you to share an inspirational quote with us in the first half of the interview, and I wondered if you had something you wanted to share before we rock this.
Yeah, I came across this. It's Andy Warhol, and I've kind of
good choice.
I may have messed it up a little bit, but I think you'll get the gist of it and how it applies to, making records. And I think he said something like, don't think about making art, just get it done. While people are judging it, make even more art.
Nice.
I just love that, because I think what happens is that we start getting too much in the business of judging not only our own, but others' art. And I think we're morally obligated to not judge, but to make it. As creative people, I think we should just focus on creating art and let the job of judgment be on other people, and don't let that get in the way of doing what you're doing. My only real rationale, actually, to the whole One Mic project.
Yeah, it's a great rationale. I mean, it's an amazing project. There was a question I was going to let go by the wayside, but when you talked about that, it just made me think about, like even the whole punk rock scene that you had done and how quickly those records were done. What would happen if you guys were trying to do those punk rock records in an era of Pro Tools? Do you think that sound and that adventure would have happened, or do you think everybody would still be trying to get the first mix on the first record right?
Yeah, I mean, there are those records being made. I mean, I've heard some of them. Yeah, they're interesting. The energy and the attitude is such a huge part. I see a real difference between live performance and record making. With record making, there's no rules. Do it any way you want to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously doing one track at a time with just Joe and I in a studio for weeks, months at a time is one way to make a record.
And that was breaking all the rules too.
And it was, and people reacted really well to it. I mean, Surfing with the Aliens still outsells every flippin' record Joe has made put together.
That's great.
I mean, to this day.
Congrats on that.
And thank you. And it was just two guys wanting to just do it differently. That was really the kind of the motivation behind it. I wanted to make a different type and sounding record, and Joe wanted to make a different record for musical reasons. So our stars sort of lined up, and that thing just happened, and it only happened once. I was purposely doing things that I couldn't do with a live band in a room playing together. I got to do one track at a time. I got to experiment, and Joe was experimenting musically. So the two of us together created something, that, we haven't wanted to duplicate that. We've gone on to do other things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great transition to the opposite, which is what you're doing now, which is working entirely with the whole band, and nothing gets layered onto it, I believe, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It is a live performance. The bands, they may do 3 or 4 takes. I think the most I've ever recorded it is maybe 7 takes. Mm-hmm. But that's partly due to maybe they weren't maybe as rehearsed as they could have been, or it's a new piece of material, because a lot of times people will bring me a new piece of material that they're excited about, and there's a lot of energy in something like that. So I would always be more open to doing something that maybe is a little unfamiliar, maybe a little edgy. Yeah. So,
I feel like I should describe it a little bit too.
Okay, sure.
You need some accolades here. So Rockstars, the One Mic series is, and John will explain it better than I, but you're setting up a stereo, what looked like a ribbon mic, and yes, in the center of a band playing together in a room. Very much an old school way of recording. It makes me think of Sinatra and Elvis, but just an awesome sound. It does not sound like what you're familiar with when you put up one mic in the middle of your band rehearsal room. This is a very, very just right balance of stuff, and super inspiring. So I felt like I needed to preface it there.
Thank you. It started off as an experiment. I didn't know if it could be done. And I was working with a band doing a multi-track recording. And I said to them one day, I don't even know why. Some people have asked me, well, what made you think of this? And I don't even know why. Maybe it was just out of the frustration of, multi-track recording and what it's become, and this sort of Pro Tools safety net that's been created. Maybe the frustration of maybe people are not bringing their A game. They all think that they can fix it later.
Right. I've got an A game, but I'm not going to let you see it.
I'm going to be my best on Thursday when I come back and do my overdubs. I mean, if everybody shows up to the session thinking that, I mean, that probably isn't going to work very well.
No, it never does. All the best music that I've done has involved people just having to discover their A game in the moment somehow.
Well, it's funny. I mean, when you tell them that, like, this is going to be live and you're not going to be able to fix anything, they perk up. They start thinking about what it is they're playing.
Yeah.
So I asked the band, I said, hey, you guys come back tomorrow and I'm going to have you record around one microphone. I want to see if I can actually pull this off. And the goal was to really make it sound like it was a multi-track recording, not just like you said earlier, like, put a mic up in a rehearsals room. I mean, anybody can do that, and that's what it's going to sound like.
Yeah.
But I wanted everything panned where it's supposed to be panned. I wanted the balances of the guitar amps and the drums and the vocal to be very much like it would be if it was a multi-track recording, which meant, of course, physically moving the amplifiers in position and getting the singers around the microphone in a way that creates this balance. And then kind of turn it over to the band to start balancing themselves. And I did an initial recording with them, and I really liked it. But most of all, the band really liked it. And it really kind of, encouraged me to continue to, modify and adapt and to, fine tune the process. So now I'm like 30 recordings into it.
Yeah, you must know a ton at this point about it.
I think I'm an expert at it at this point. And I'm still learning. And every time I bring a band into a room and I try to do this, I'm faced with a whole new set of problems.
Right.
The rooms have a big say in whether or not it's going to be successful or not, or how successful it might be. Mm-hmm. And, the musicians themselves, they've grown up in a multi-track world where they know that they can get balanced later. They're going to turn it over to someone, and that person will balance it later. So the idea that they actually have to balance it here and now is foreign to them. So it takes time to kind of get their head wrapped around the idea that if I hit this tom hard, somebody can't turn it down later. I actually have to balance my own drum kit. And that's probably the hardest job in the room is the drummer. They're used to playing with headphones and maybe even doing their own mix. So they don't even know what their dynamics are at all.
Yeah, true. So do you mind if I ask you some sort of specific questions about stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's talk about the mic. It seems like I've seen the same mic in some of the videos. Have you sort of settled on a mic that is your preferred one for recording this stuff?
Yes. The first mic I ever tried this with was a AEA R88, which is a stereo ribbon microphone. And it's the one I've stuck with. There's other microphones similar that are available. But as far as I'm concerned, this mic does what I need it to do. So I haven't really entertained the idea of trying anything else.
How often does somebody try and suggest, this futuristic mic where you can rebalance everything later? You're like, dude, you're missing the point.
Yeah, exactly. Why go there? I can do that. I've made those records. The nature of a ribbon microphone is that it is bidirectional. And the beauty of that is that the frequency response on both sides of the ribbon are identical. You don't, like with a condenser mic, there's usually one side, it's usually the forward side, sounds like it's supposed to, and then the back side of that capsule never quite sounds the same. It'll sound different. Sometimes it doesn't sound as good, and sometimes it might even sound better depending on the circumstances. So I couldn't really rely on a condenser microphone for this application. I wanted something that was truly unhyped, and of course a ribbon has no upper high frequencies being jacked up like a condenser would. That way I can really set up a band on both sides of the microphone, the front side, and get a 90-degree stereo spread. And on the back side of the microphone, I get an equal stereo spread of 90 degrees. On the sides of the microphone, those are what I'd call the dead zone, 90 degrees on the left and 90 degrees on the right. So basically, I have two stereo fields I get to work in. And this is ideal for what I'm trying to do, because I got to record drums, electric bass, electric guitars, usually more than one. Oftentimes the keyboard that's going to go through an amp, and then singers. So I really need two stereo fields. I don't think I could get them all crammed into one 90-degree stereo field. So the beauty of the ribbon microphone is I have two fields to work in. The other thing is that the frequency response of a ribbon is ideal for this because it doesn't have a hyped up top end. So things like cymbals and S's from vocals and stuff are not accentuated. And it takes EQ very nicely. Yeah. I can just add a little bit of air to those or just bump up a shelf, and it's lovely. It also has a low frequency extension to it, which is also useful in this process because things are far away from the mic. I don't get the advantage of a proximity effect.
Right, totally. And if there's a little bit of resonance on a drum, you're really the ribbon's going to pick that up from a distance.
Exactly. And again, it takes EQ well, so I'm able to EQ it.
Let me ask you some more questions about the stereo image. So when you talk about a 90-degree stereo, if I'm standing in front of the mic, dead center, and looking at it, it's sort of one side of the field is looking 45 degrees over my right shoulder, and the other side's looking 45 degrees over my left shoulder. Is that sort of the way to envision this?
Yes.
Okay, so what does that mean as far as placement of the lead singer? Where do you place the voice that you want to sound focused and panned right in the middle, right to the center?
They have to sing directly into the middle of the two ribbons. The ribbons are stacked on top of each other. So if you're singing directly into the center of those two stacked ribbons, your voice comes up dead center.
Okay, groovy. So you're sort of hitting each ribbon straight on, or at least at an angle, but your voice is not missing detail somehow. It's not like a spaced pair of stereo mics or an ORTF or something where there could be a hole in the center.
No, there's no hole in the center because the proximity of those two ribbons are right on top of each other, and the frequency response is identical. So you're going to get a nice dead center vocal. Now, the problem with that is, of course, if somebody moves their head around, you're going to hear it, slightly shift from left to right. So it's very critical that the singers really aim at that middle of that microphone.
Wow. Have you figured out some tricks to help them stay focused and singing in the right direction and not move around?
Not really. I mean, just sort of the usual thing. So I'll put tape on the floor and say, don't go past this line, sing into I usually mark the microphone so they know exactly where the center of the mic is, because if you've seen the mic, it's a big, long black thing, and it's hard for them to sometimes know where it is. I painted a little white dot on the backside to help people, aim. But there's recordings, and you'll hear them in my series where you'll see the vocalist shift their head, and you'll hear the voice slightly move left and right. I had one guitar player, Boo Ray, in Sun Studio, and he tended to, after he'd sing a phrase, right before he would finish the phrase, he would turn his head and look at his neck of his guitar. And almost at the end of every phrase, you hear his voice just slightly go to the left a little bit.
That's great.
And I told him, I said after the first couple of times, I said, hey, Boo, you got to just keep your head in the center. You can't keep looking at your neck. It was just a habit he had gotten into.
Totally.
So it's there, but it's just, it's not a perfect process. However, I'm willing to give up, the technical perfection of it to capture these moments in time that'll never happen again, which is a band playing a song from top to bottom without any editing at all, no safety net. It's
Right.
just them. It's just them and their song. The video documents that. And I think that's really important to only have one camera and have it move with the music and it also be unedited from top to bottom. It's a very, very intimate and exposing and vulnerable, presentation of a recording artist. And quite honestly, I'm shocked that so many people agree to do it because it is incredibly intimate and they lose all control.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have, producers and engineers and, people behind the scenes who are going to rush into post-production and fix everything for them.
Right. You don't have to deliver stems to the record label.
Exactly. I mean, they're really out there. And I told them, I said, I'm not trying to suggest that this is a way to replace the way you've been making records. Of course, you should continue to make the records, multi-track recordings. I'm just saying that this is just another way to present your art to the world. It's in a way we're inviting people to come into these rooms with the band and watch them sing and perform their songs.
Yeah. So I've done some, I've noticed that sometimes you do headphones. So that was one of my questions. Do you find that headphones are the appropriate addition to recording this way or no headphones?
I leave it up to them. Technically, I would think that having headphones would be better because you're actually going to react to the mix, because what you're hearing in your headphones is essentially, literally, what the audience will be hearing. That is the mix.
Yeah.
So you would be able to judge, your balance really well. But surprisingly, I would say more than half the artists choose not to wear them because we fine-tune the balance of the band so well in the room that they don't need them, that they actually feel completely comfortable performing without headphones. And I think that's amazing. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
But,
I did a record years ago for an artist named Amy Loftus, and we decided, I convinced her, again, kind of like you, can't believe I was able to convince her, but I convinced her to do an album with no headphones, all live. And we did it live. It was a live mix down to 2-track. And so we were using tape too, and we were having to make decisions on the fly. This was multi-track. It wasn't one mic, but still it was the no headphone thing. And two things were remarkable to me. One is that it was a hell of a lot louder in the control room than it actually was out where the music was happening.
Yes.
And two was that the musicians in the band, they didn't get wiped out quite so quickly. They were played all day long because it was so gentle out there,
Yeah, that's actually really quite true, Lidge. It's very interesting. The way they listen is different too. Modern studios, multi-track recording, everybody has their own little mixer sitting next to them. And, they make the adjustments necessary. It's usually me, the loudest. Mm-hmm. That's the adjustment. I want me, the loudest, because they're focused on them. And I've often wondered, how is that influencing the final result if everyone is listening to themselves more than anybody else in the room? I can understand why you'd want to do that. It just makes sense. But the conversation that takes place in the room when people aren't wearing headphones is better because you're forced to listen to the other person. And it's not unlike a conversation between two people. It's a better conversation if both people are willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. And I've realized a while ago that music really at its core is a conversation between human beings.
It is. It really is. And I've gone out, and I'm sure you have too, and gone out into the studio during a playback, and you walk around and you grab like the drummer's headphones and put them on, and all you hear is kick and snare. You don't hear the singer. You don't hear a lot of the important elements that will contribute to how you play the song.
Yeah.
It's been subtracted from their mixes. And I thought, now maybe that was part of the impetus of doing the one mic process was trying to get back to that thing, try to get back to the conversation.
Yeah.
And to give them that, when bands come into studios now, it's all taken away from them. The engineer runs out and puts microphones on all of them. They're all given their own mixers, and they don't really have a whole lot of say in it. So I kind of dispensed with all of that. I took away that safety net of Pro Tools.
Yeah.
You have to show up. You have to be present. You have to have a conversation with your intimate brethren here in the room, and it'll show. You'll hear it and you'll see it in the video. And that's really what I want to present to people.
So 2 questions for you. One is, when you guys hit go, I'm going to suggest, you don't shoot the video yourself, right? You have somebody who does video with you?
Yes, I have. Actually, I'm looking for a new guy because he's moved out of my guy, Nathaniel Cofield, who's been brilliant at this, has just left town, and I need somebody now. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Calling all rock stars. Do you want them to reach out to you any particular way?
Sure. They can just send me an email. You can find it on my website. But it's a very specific gig. You have to have a musical background, which Nathaniel did, because you have to follow the arrangements of the songs. He would listen to the songs in advance, the studio recordings, and he would learn the arrangements because he would have to be in a certain place at a certain time for each part of the arrangement. And he would do a nice, gentle ballet around the band while, they're performing to be, in the right position. So
shoes or no shoes?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because on a recent video, it was Cedric Burnside, just him and his acoustic guitar at Sun Studio. And I can hear Nathaniel walking around, and it drives me crazy. I did not know it at the time. It completely got by me because I was so mesmerized by Cedric's performance. I was just like, oh my God. And it was first take. And we never did a second take because it was just so magical.
Yeah.
And then later when I got home and I was syncing it to the video and I had headphones on, I was listening to it. I was going, man, what's that sound? What's that sound? It's going, it's Nathaniel. I can hear him moving around.
Am I remembering correctly that Cedric also played drums for RL in the band for a while, or do I have that wrong?
No, he is an amazing drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's really, we've got 2 videos of him doing 2 songs at Sun Studio. I have the mic back a ways from him, like about 5 feet, so you can really hear him in the room. So I tried to recreate what it might have been like the first day Muddy Waters walked in and started playing,
So cool. Did you get a chance to chat with or meet up with Matt Rossbang when you were in Memphis?
No, I've only chatted with him through Messenger. And
okay, cool.
So really, I heard his interview. Was it with you?
Yep. We did an interview at right in the middle of Sam Phillips' recording, which they've been revitalizing, which is a beautiful place too.
Yes. While he was talking, I kept going, wow, this is like the Southern version of me. I mean, I rarely agree with people on these podcasts. Everything he said, I agreed with. I went, this is weird. This never happens.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me keep pushing forward on technique. So the videographer has to sort of perform along with the band in that moment. What do you do? What have you discovered? I imagine all the work for you is leading up to the performance, and then you do something when the performance happens.
Well, during the performance, I act as a producer in the sense that I'm taking notes about each take, what potential problems there might have been. I listen to headphones. I generally won't use the studio monitors for this because it's just way too critical. And I'm not. If I'm at a room I've never worked in before, I can't really rely on those. So I wear my own headphones and I'll just take notes. And then I'll go back, after a take or so, I'll go out into the room and I'll ask the band how they're feeling and if there's anything they need. And then I'll give them my opinion about the take or takes. And then if I feel like I've got something I want to share with them that I think it's really good, I will send them in. And that's probably the most tense, anxiety-ridden moment for me, because I don't really know what the band's going to think about these recordings. You know?
Have you thought about adding an additional layer of stress and recording over each take when you have them redo the next take?
That would be old school. But no, I have the benefit of digital. I have to record in digital. Some people say, well, why aren't you recording in analog if you're going to do this? And I go, well, because I don't want to have to try to sync that to video. That's just insane. Really? It'll never sync. You just have to, what you end up doing is chopping up, you have to edit stuff. And my rule is no editing. So the only way I can get away with it is to record at 9624, then I sample rate to 48K, which is the video standard, and then I sync it. And once it's synced, it's synced. It doesn't come out of sync. Yeah,
when I do video around here, I run into all kinds of mismatches on cameras and iPhones and things. And I've learned that since audio is the most important element of what I'm trying to do, if I make a video, the audio stays untouched, and I just, squeeze frame rates on videos and speed them up and slow them down ever so slightly to make them line up if needed.
Yeah.
But not ideal. Okay, so then more questions for you about that. So have you settled on a favorite pair of headphones that you're listening to when you do this?
I use the Sennheiser HD650s. Okay. I take those on the road with me. I take those to studios. At home, I have the HD800S. I think it's called the HDS. It has a little bit better low end than just the standard 800s. I really love them. They're super critical. So I rely on those. Lots of detail. Yeah, extreme amount of detail. Very unforgiving. If there's a problem, you're going to hear it. Okay, good. And then how about preamps? Have you settled on a favorite pair of preamps for your mic? Yes, that would be the Millennia HV3C. And it's not just the fact that they're just brilliant sounding mic pre's. They're very super clean, of course, and sterile, but not in a bad way. Mm-hmm. They're very pleasant sounding microphone preamps, but at the same time, extremely low noise, extreme wide bandwidth. Right. But the real reason why I chose that pre was because the gains are detented and they're calibrated within, an eighth of a dB. So I have to have that when I'm doing these sessions with the stereo ribbon, because I have to know that the gain is absolutely the same on both the left and right channel. Because if I put my headphones on and I notice that the singer's a little left heavy or right heavy, I will know it's because they're not singing directly into that mic. Where if I had variable gain on the mic pre, one might just go over and turn that right channel up a little bit. But then that throws off my entire calibration of the entire room and the rest of the instruments in the room. Or you'd be out there moving the singer around and twisting them into a pretzel all day long. Yeah, because you don't know is it the gain on the pre or is it where their position is the problem. Yeah. So I eliminate that by having fixed gain. I'm glad I'm asking these questions. So now what about, you talked about the ability to add some EQ. Is that a decision you might make at the recording process or later when you get back and you're mixing it? Or what tool would you use to add some EQ and how would you do that? I cut everything flat because I don't want to try to manipulate what I'm hearing with EQ during the recording, because I'd rather go out in the room and add a little more top to that guitar or take some of the boominess out of the bass or something. Fix it out there in the studio rather than trying to fix it with EQ immediately, because those are problems that are hard to fix in post. So I try to get it as close as I can. Yeah, because if you fix it in post, if you take a frequency out of one instrument, you're taking it out of the other ones as well. Exactly. So in post, I will do, I keep it in the box, of course, and I'll do some EQ, sort of kind of a preliminary EQ, and then I'll do some more surgical type of stuff, I use this plugin by Hoffa called the IQ EQ. It's a very cool equalizer / limiter multiband processor, if you will. I can go in and I can massage it with some EQ, but I can also parametrically zero in on a particular resonance or a frequency and bring in a dynamics on that band and actually use some limiting there. It's like a multiband.
Okay, cool.
Where you have some Q and you have gain, and you can, massage the mix a little bit to your liking. So that's like my primary go-to.
Well, so that kind of answers the question I was going to ask, which was whether or not compression comes into the post-production on this at all.
Well, it will. I mean, I use the Hoffa mostly as surgical limiting. In other words, some note on the bass, it just booms out because of the design of the room. Mm-hmm. So I can go in there and I can find that note and I can have the limiter just push it down a little bit to even the mix out a little bit. And then once the EQ and this, what I would call surgical limiting has taken place, then I'll usually put some sort of bus compressor, typically like an SSL, bus compressor or the Fairchild. I like the UAD plugs. Usually would use those for like the Fairchild or the SSL. And that's just, to glue it, a couple of dB. And then from there, I'll go to the UAD precision limiter just as a safety, brick wall limiter to just get the gain up and keep it under control.
Have you experimented with parallel compression and found that to be a useful tool as post-production?
No, and quite honestly, I'm not a fan of, and I know a lot of the guys you've interviewed are,
right?
and I'm not judging. I'm just observing here. I'm not a fan of it. I've never been a fan of parallel compression.
Well, interestingly enough, I've heard that it came from the classical world actually, and was which one mic, a single stereo mic reminds me of that, and just trying to sort of compact the information onto vinyl records with a less dynamic range, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, listen, people swear by it, and so it must work. I personally have struggled with it and always felt that I could get the job done without it.
Yeah, totally.
But, for me, the one mic, all the hard work is in the front end. All the hard work is really getting it sorted out during the recording, and I do come from a multi-track world where, of course, we don't have to worry about that stuff. I could get a band up and recording within a half an hour. Just throw microphones up, just get a level. You're good to go. There's really no thought in balance.
Right.
I mean, of course, you've got to get a rough mix so that when they come in, they're impressed. But I mean, that's important. But for me, now I'm really sticking my neck out with this stuff. I have to get it right during the recording because there's no going back.
Well, so one of the elements in music recording and mixing that we all work very hard to try and get right is the vocals. Maybe you can talk a little bit about getting the vocals to be just right in a one mic recording. And have you noticed that singers tend to control their own dynamics in a better way as a result of this? How do you end up with a vocal that feels like it sits in the mix just right if you're not using a big fancy tube mic and 3 compressors and limiters and parallel compression and all the other crap we use?
It shows that it can be done because I don't get to use those things. I don't get to have a channel dedicated to the singer with all that processing. But I think that the nature of what I'm doing doesn't ask for it particularly. If I get the singer close to the microphone, and I can, and I have, you'll see on some of the videos, there's one by a young lady by the name of Essence. She is right on it. She has a very soft, high, wispy voice. And when she first started singing, I thought, oh, this is a deal breaker. I'm never going to be able to get her loud enough to compete with the flipping band in a room,
Yeah.
But I got her in really close, and the microphone has some proximity to it. So I got her in close. I could get a nice intimate sound with her. What I used, what I used on that was the Bobcat's K stereo plug-in by UA.
Oh, okay, cool.
It has an MS adjustment. So for this particular recording where I really wanted to try to get the vocal loud, I actually used MS to bring up the middle and back down the sides a little bit, which of course are all the instruments, the guitars and everything else that's out to the side.
Yeah.
Gives me a couple of dB more gain in the center channel. When she was singing, she's the only thing in the center. So it was easy to get an extra couple of dB out of that.
That's cool. So that's very interesting because you're talking about a Blumline stereo that the center is sort of halfway between the two mics getting recorded that way, but then using an MS decoder to readjust those levels later. Is it possible to take the two, ribbons, the stereo, and turn it 45 degrees and actually treat it like an MS pattern, or does it lose that MS ability because the center ribbon has a back side to it in the figure 8?
I've never done it, but I believe it can be done. I mean, typically an MS is a cardioid and a bi-directional microphone. I'm pretty sure that you could do it. I don't think it'd be quite as effective as having a cardioid, but I would think it could be done.
It's fascinating. I've tried to wrap my brain around it, and I wondered if the backside of the ribbon, the figure 8, because it's a minus, would sort of try and flip-flop the left and the right image against the sides. Rockstars, well, I know we're getting deep here.
Yeah, we're in the weeds a little bit, but I remember reading in the literature for the R88 that they do mention MS.
Oh,
so
cool. Very cool.
It may very well be a practical application, but I haven't done it and I haven't needed to do it. I add reverb and or delay sometimes to these recordings.
Right. I wanted to ask you about that.
Okay. Well, the send to those reverbs has an MS control on it. So I am forcing more mid to the reverb. So it's more focused on the singer, because that's really where I want that reverb, is on the singer, not on that guitar on the far left or far right. So I can really center that up better with that.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to ask if sometimes you choose to do the effects out in the room coming into the mic versus sometimes you just choose to put an effect on the whole thing. And I guess you just answered that question. If you're going to put a delay on it, it's on everything except that you have some more control if you can, focus it just on the mid.
Yes. The instruments certainly have to have whatever effects is required. For instance, if a guitar player wants reverb, he's going to have reverb on his amp. If he wants a delay, he's going to have to, and that's usually not a problem because all these guys are rolling in with a bunch of foot pedals. So,
right.
And they play live, so they're using reverbs and delays and stuff on their guitars. That's not asking too much. And so they do that. And then, but obviously the vocal's going to be dry. And so that is okay for some stuff. But again, I'm trying to recreate a multi-track recording. I'm not just trying to document a band in a room. Of course, the vocal will be dry. No, I'm trying to actually make it sound like a record. So I will add some reverb.
Has the inventor in you imagined sort of a mic up near the voice that's just feeding effects that are physically in the room that you're trying to get to hit the mic just right? I could picture a pair of speakers that you position on either side of your stereo image that are just feeding the vocal effect that you can blend in just right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, go do it, Lidge. I think that's a great idea.
That's the right answer.
I think you should do that.
It's a lot easier for me to make this stuff up than it is for you who already have a full plate out there doing that.
Well, yeah, interesting enough, I'm about to embark on an all-instrumental guitar record with Paul Gilbert, where he wants to do it with one microphone. And at first I thought, I don't want to do guitar instrumental records. I've done those with Joe, and I don't really want to do them with anybody else. But then I started thinking, wow, if I could do this with one microphone, it would sound unlike anything that's ever been done before. And it would be challenging. But on the other hand, the fact that I'm not dealing with singers or necessarily acoustic instruments besides the drums, it gives me a lot more control over things. Mm-hmm. So kind of getting back to what you just said, what I'm going to do is I'll have Paul's guitar dead center, like you would a singer. And then I will have some amplifiers out to the sides that will only have his effects. So I will essentially be recording a stereo guitar.
Cool.
Or a mono guitar with stereo effects, things like that. And it also allows me to take the microphone and get it really close to the drums. So the drums are more in your face, because I can always turn the guitar amplifiers up as loud as I need to balance against that. Where with a singer, you don't get to do that.
So this would still be a live performance on the one mic, or would this be a multi-track?
No, it'd be live.
Okay.
It'd be live. He wants to do it live.
Well, now I did do a record for an artist named Will Kimbrough here, and we had one song on there, and I think the song was, oh shoot, I forgot the title of it, but we did, we put up one mono mic in one spot in the room and then decided that he would just move around the room to different positions for every overdub, but we never moved the mic, and that was kind of fun to do.
Oh, you did it with a mono mic?
Yeah, with a mono mic. So it didn't really create a stereo image so much, but it just created space by having instruments further and closer to the mic.
Yeah, I've done that with a stereo microphone where if you're going to do like acoustic guitars or singers or percussion and stuff like that, it's really cool. On the first stereo pass, you put them on one side, and on the second stereo pass, you put them on the other side, and then you kind of you end up with 20 channels of stereo, but it's actually quite pleasing to listen to. I guess Bruce Sweetin did a lot of stereo recording like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Somebody else had mentioned that on the show too, and I was going to mention that he was talking about always recording in stereo if you can.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this, and am I wearing you out with all these questions yet, or you got some more energy? Okay, great.
Hey,
great.
I'm still a young man.
All right, good. I mean, after all, you did, create all the punk rock that gets us all amped up anyway. What about the process? Let's talk about starting one of these sessions and working with the band, helping getting them settled, discovering what our dynamic and our volumes are going to be, positioning people, that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll take the series I just finished called The South, because I went to both Muscle Shoals and to Sun Studio to record 5 acts doing 2 songs each. So I'll just use that as an example.
Very cool.
I wanted to go to those 2 studios, because I've always wanted to visit them, but I didn't want to visit them as a tourist. They have tours running through those things every day.
Yeah.
I wanted to actually go in and make a recording to really get the full benefit and the effect of it. So, I kind of wanted to stick my neck out a little bit, because I could make the one mic recordings here in the Bay Area at the studio called 25th Street in Oakland. That is it's a multi-million-dollar studio. The studio itself is brilliant sound. And it's just great. It's hard to make a bad record in there because the room is just so beautifully designed and acoustically adjusted and stuff like that. So I thought, well, I want to push the envelope here, and the whole thing could blow up in my face. I'm going to go to some studios I've never been in before. I want to work with some bands who aren't friends of mine, I've never met, and I want to see what happens. So I brought my son with me, and I said, you got to shoot B-roll the entire time. In other words, his iPhone camera on a little gimbal, a Steadicam.
Yeah.
I want you to walk around. I want you to film everything, because this thing is either going to turn out to be really cool or it's going to be a disaster. Either way, I got to have it recorded. I want it documented.
Yeah.
So he came along and just did this great job. And I've got some of those videos are now posted on my YouTube channel, where you can see me in the rooms working with the bands. I've got a bunch more I'm going to be putting out. They're not really tutorials. They're more like, the making of kind of thing. And it shows kind of the problems, that are endemic to what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
But what I had to do is I went online and I just started looking for bands in the area because I wanted to use bands from Memphis or in one case, Nashville. And I wanted to use people from Alabama. I wanted to use people from Sheffield. I wanted to use bands from the area because I think that they are the sound. Like Jimmy Johnson said, it's the people that are making the music. It isn't the walls or the paint or the furniture. So it was really important for me. If I was going to go there, I wanted to work with local musicians. So I went on a hunt, and some people were recommended to me, and other people I just found through searching on the internet, looking at YouTube videos of them on stage playing live and thinking, yeah, I think they could pull it off. Some bands send me their recordings that they've done, but I can't trust them.
Yeah, you can't really tell anything from that.
No, I don't know if these people can sing in tune, and I don't know if the drummer was all cut to grit or not. So I need an honest representation, and it could be something really crappy, like just an iPhone, from the back of the room taken by the drummer's girlfriend or something. It didn't matter. I just wanted to see what they look like and hear whether or not they can get through a whole song without, blowing it up. So once I found acts that I liked, now I had to get them to agree to do this and then to get them to be at these studios on these certain dates, because I was going to come in on a Friday, record for 2 or 3 days in 2 different studios, and then come home. So I had a very tight schedule. And, to make a long story short, I was able to find the acts, and they all showed up very well prepared and ready and willing to do it. And without trepidation, they were just all great.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes certain members of the band didn't get the memo about what I was doing.
Right. I can see that. I can see the person you're talking to the most gets it. And they sort of kind of communicated at the 1 or 2 band rehearsals to the drummer or whoever else.
But they didn't really get it until they walked in. They see, wow, why isn't there a microphone on my snare drum? Well, can we do that? It's like, no, it's against the rules. No, we're not doing that. One of the acts came in. They had studio musicians with them. I could tell that they were not so sure that this was ever going to work, because they were seasoned studio cats. And of course, everything's always multi-tracked and it always sounds amazing and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So when I send them in to the control room, after I feel like I've got something that's balanced enough that I could, have them hear it, it's scary for me. I usually go out into the studio at that point and just wait for them to come out of the control room to read their expressions and to sort of get the kind of vibe and, hear whatever comments they might be making to each other about it and stuff like that. Oh. And so they rolled out of the control room, and one of the guys, really sweet gentleman, guitar player, he comes up to me and he goes, "This is some kind of hocus pocus magic stuff. I don't know what the hell you're doing, but that sounds amazing."
That's great, man.
And I went, wow, thank you so much. That's the best thing you could have possibly said to me.
Well, so how about, I've done a little bit of this no headphone stuff, and I feel like I always have to begin with the vocals, make sure that the voice sounds great. And then, it's like reverse mixing. If we have a tendency to mix from the kick drum up, this is the reverse of that. It's like, start with the vocal, make sure that sounds great. Now start adding things. If something doesn't sound right, then you can't add it.
Perfect. In fact, Lidge, that's exactly what I do. I start with the singer and whatever the primary instrument happens to be. It's usually a guitar. If they're just singing and playing acoustic guitar, then I'll just get the perfect balance of that vocal and that guitar first. And then I slowly start adding one instrument at a time. Because, if you put that mic up and you get the band out there and they just start playing at rehearsal level, it's
chaos, right?
It's a mess. It's a mess. And
what about adjustments? What do you adjust? Do you have a stool that goes up and down for the singer guitar player, or does the mic move higher or lower initially?
The microphone has to be set for the singer. There's just no getting around that. So I have stools. In fact, when I went to Memphis, I went to Target the first day and I bought 3 stools that are, I think they're about 38 inches, 40 inches high. They're bar stools. And I brought those with me because I couldn't rely on Muscle Shoals or Sun to have those stools for me because I have to put the combo amps on those.
Careful, John. You may have just launched the legend of the 38-inch stool. If this takes off.
Oh, the Target will have a run on them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I better go buy some.
Everybody will want to know. It's like the Glyn Johns drum thing. Is it 2 drumsticks from the center of the snare up, or
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to derail you. I have a tendency to do that.
Yeah, you can't. Obviously, the amplifiers can't be on the floor because they're not going to be heard by the microphone properly. The bottom capsule is going to probably hear more of it, and it'll just mess everything up. So the amplifiers, they don't have to be at exact parallel to the center of the microphone. I think ideally that would be the case, but I'm just never going to find anything to put the amplifiers on that's going to be tall enough. So I have found that a 32 to 40 inch bar stool, gets it. It works. Yeah. I don't even know why it works, but it works. And so I put those out to the far left and right. If there's usually 2 guitar players, and then I will balance the level of that guitar amplifier based on how loud the singer is singing by just adjusting the. Usually these most sophisticated, or even the old ones, the guys are using foot pedals. There's some sort of master volume I can adjust to get the amplifier at just the right level. Mm-hmm. Just like you were moving a fader up and down in the control room. I just try to get those amplifiers to be balanced left and right and a good balance against the singer.
And have you guys adopted some really simple but helpful techniques of, the Sharpie and the piece of tape that reminds them exactly where that knob's supposed to be?
Yeah, you're way ahead of me, Lidge. This is exactly what I do. I put tape down. I put it on their foot pedal if they have a master on that. If the stomp box is going to be the master control, I'll put a piece of tape down and mark it with a Sharpie, or I'll also do it on the guitar amplifier itself. But I tell you, and you know this, every guitar player will tell you that when you start turning the volumes of guitar amplifiers down, they get to a point where it's like all or nothing.
Right.
You just breathe on them and they go like they get 6 dB louder. So It's painstaking sometimes to get it right.
Maybe that's the next box. It's going to be, I don't know what it is. It's you did the Reamp. I don't know what this one's called. This one's called like the amp leveler or something like that.
That's a brilliant idea. If I were to continue this, I would probably build a high impedance box that sits between the guitar and the amplifier that has like 1 dB increment detented knobs switch.
There you go.
Where I could like just run out, click it up 2, go to the other guitar, click him down 1, and just keep doing that until I got it. That would be excellent.
And then the ultimate one will be that you'll be able to remote control it from the control room. But you probably appreciate getting up out of your chair and running into the other room, as I do. I want more movement in the studio, not less.
Yes. Well, I love being in the studio. In fact, oftentimes I'll just go out and put my headphones on and be out in the studio so I can be with the band, and I'll just listen to the mix with my headphones on while they're performing it in the room. And I turn it up real loud because I'm listening to detail and stuff like that. And it's so weird when I take the headphones off and just listen to the band in the room and realize just how quiet they are.
Right.
They're just like so quiet. And then you put the headphones on, it sounds like a full-blown record, like blasting.
Which is funny because in a traditional studio environment with full volume levels, we get frustrated by the fact that it's so hard to put on a pair of headphones and glean anything useful out in the studio because there's always something else so loud there. But in this case, you could really put the headphones on and hear pretty much what the mix is going to sound like.
Exactly.
Very cool. So now what about, do you have any, you want to share any visions for where you might go with this stuff? Do you have any, like you're going to go record somebody in the Taj Mahal next, or, what's the most exotic stop for you that's on your bucket list?
I've kicked this around a lot and people have asked me, where do you go from here? One thing that maybe people don't realize is that I finance all of this. I don't pay the bands because obviously they're getting a video and a recording out of it. But it's all on my dime. And I do it because I love it. And it's my expression of art. Mm-hmm. I'm not just a technician, recording engineer. I actually see myself as an artist. But I've never been like a musical producer type. I've never felt comfortable in that role. I've been more like a recording engineer who can facilitate a good recording and a good mix.
Like you didn't want to tell Joe which 16 notes to play?
Never. No, I'm not. That's just not my calling. It's not what I do. A lot of people do. I'm no George Martin or Quincy Jones. I'm not that type of producer who could go out and pick up the guitar and say, play it like this. I'm not going to do that. But this is a way for me to bring something to the party that is unusual and hasn't really ever been done before. Well, this is where people remind me of the Cowboy Junkies record Trinity sessions, I think they're called, where they recorded with a mic or two in a church. But again, my goal is always to make this thing sound like a multi-track recording, not a band in a church singing around a microphone.
Right, totally. And you've been doing this music thing for a long time. You have begun things that have been business ventures, and you're beginning something now. And I haven't asked you how old you are, but I imagine that you maybe have a different perspective about what it means to you to begin a project today versus what it might have meant to you 30 years ago. Do you have any comments on, or advice for anybody who is wanting to pour their heart into a project, and, smart things to be aware of if you want it to also be sort of a, something that can financially help you as a business?
Well, I think recognizing the singer and the song is really the most important prospect. I think that's the thing that you really have to be guided by. That's what guides me. I mean, I really am drawn to the singer-songwriter. The days of pulling my hair out with gear and trying to create something new and exciting by plugging things in backwards, I've kind of lost that drive to do that. Mm-hmm. There's so many people now that are doing it so well that it isn't even something that inspires me. What inspires me now is that singer and that song, and that's what I look for. And there's an endless supply of it. It really is. Mm-hmm. Listening to other people's records and going, wow, I want to do that. I want to try to do that. I want to make something like that. You could do that for the rest of your life and never, ever become fulfilled. But there's nothing more fulfilling for me, and I think for a lot of people, than to help a really great singer-songwriter get that recording made.
Yeah.
Because it's timeless. That song will always be good, and that singer will always be good, and that song will always stay with us. You could listen to it 30 years from now, where all the technical, wow, whiz bang processing, manipulation and stuff. I don't know if that's really going to be moving people 6 months from now, let alone 20 years from now.
Well, I think it's okay for us to change our interests along the way. I mean, they just evolve. Or, if you really like chocolate one day and you have a lot of chocolate, you might not crave chocolate as much later. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it's okay. And I think that, some of these records that we've talked about, punk rock all the way back in the 80s and working with Joe and doing the kind of the metal sound, they're iconic signatures of sound and record creations, but it's so cool that you did them, and that we get to listen to them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you, that's the only thing you're ever going to be interested in doing.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I could stumble upon something tomorrow and completely change my mind about it. At this point, people are starting to come to me wanting to do the one mic recordings. And I think that's great because it was not part of my grand plan. My grand plan was to just do something that hadn't been done or refine it to a point it's never been refined to before, because of the pleasure of listening to great singers and songwriters. And, if people start coming to me wanting to do it, I'm going to be inclined to want to work with them on that because I think their motivation is to really bring something pure and organic to the world. And that's kind of what I'd like to help facilitate.
That's so cool. And I'm glad you're doing it. And I remember seeing some of the first posts that you were doing, sharing the results of what you're doing. And I was just like, oh, that's cool as shit, man. That's really cool.
Thank you.
So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being on the show with us here and sharing all this great, wonderful knowledge. I love hearing all these details on how you do the one mic sessions. So Rockstars, I hope you've enjoyed this as well. And I highly recommend that you try this stuff. I mean, I hope this inspires a lot of people to do it. I'd love to see what you're doing, John, is the beginning of a whole community of people doing this, all over, and you guys just creating great music everywhere.
Yeah, I want to share my knowledge on how to do it, and I have a little tutorial that's on my YouTube channel that kind of shows exactly what I do. It's no big secret. I encourage other engineers to give it a try. You don't have to have AEA or 88. You just need a couple of mics that are bidirectional, and go do it. And I'll tell you, if you do it and shoot a video of it, I'll post it on my one mic series, as other people's contributions, because I think it's a worthy endeavor. I think it really highlights the abilities of the singer-songwriter, and it showcases, the artist in a natural environment in a way that maybe they may never have that opportunity. If all their recording is going to be multi-track, I can pretty much count on it. And even a live performance is multi-tracked and overdubbed sometimes. So it's really the only avenue to, bring somebody into your home. And that's really the goal. Well,
I love it. I love the sound of a single mic or a stereo mic, the way it captures sound. It's just so together, if you get the sound into it right, it can't be, you can't fake that any other way.
It's hard though. I'll just warn you, when you first put up those guitar amps and get those singers around there and you start going and you go in and listen to it and you go, what the hell is this? This is terrible. Don't give up. Go out there, work with the band. It may take 2 or 3 or 4 hours to get a balance, but once you get that balance, you can sit back and relax and let the music happen. And dig this, you don't have to show up on Thursday and do overdubs with the singer.
You're done. When you all go out to dinner that night, you're already done.
Yeah, short of some simple mastering, it's done. Yeah.
So cool. Well, John, let the rock stars know how they can find you, learn more about you. How can they go check out the One Mic Minimalist recording series?
They can go to my website, which is johncuniberti.com. There's a link to One Mic, which shows an explanation and then a bunch of links to the videos. Or you can go to the YouTube channel, which is One Mic, the Minimalist recording series. And all the videos are there. There will be soon almost 30 videos available from all sorts of different musicians and singer-songwriters and from 3 or 4 different studios.
So cool. Well, we can't wait till you come to Nashville too. I don't know when that is, or hopefully I didn't already miss it, but.
No, I think it's definitely on my bucket list.
Groovy.
Yeah, I'd love, I mean, the musicianship there would be why I'd go. I mean,
Totally.
I think it's a population of people that would embrace this process and would really love giving it a shot.
You might even find some good songwriters here.
Yeah, there might be a few.
Groovy. Well, John, thanks so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars. It's an absolute honor to hang out with you and to listen to you share all this wisdom with us. Can't wait to meet you in person. And thanks for being here, man.
Thank you, Lidge. I enjoy your podcast. I don't think there's one I've heard where I haven't thought to myself, wow, why didn't I think of that? You know,
are you sure you listened to my intro episode? That one you might have skipped over. Who knows?
No, I've learned so much, and there's so much more to learn. So thank you, Lidge.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you around the studio.
All right. Thank you, man.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.